Welcome to Podcasting in 3 Easy Steps with me, Juliana.
And me, Susie. It's a show that's all about helping you create a great podcast. Are you ready to share your voice with the world but don't know where to start?
Well, you've definitely come to the right place. We understand the excitement and challenges that come with launching your own podcast.
In this show, we break down the podcasting process into 3 simple steps that will guide you from idea to a brilliant podcast your audience will love. Our mission is to make the podcasting journey accessible and enjoyable for everyone.
Together, we'll explore the ins and outs of podcasting, from crafting engaging content to finding your own unique style and also connecting with your listeners. It's our aim to empower you with the knowledge and tools you need to get going.
Because podcasting isn't just about recording, it's about building a community, making meaningful connections, and sharing your passion with the world. We're here to support you every step of the way.
So grab your headphones and get ready to begin your show.
And don't forget to hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. So in this episode, we're going back to basics and we're talking all about artwork. It's the first thing your listener will see and notice about your podcast. So it's got to be something that's really distinctive, that's going to grab their attention and really get them hooked in to want to even listen to your podcast. So here's 3 things that we think are really important. Number 1, bold and easy to see, a clear, good, tiny thumbnail, and also to try and test it. Jules, you've got some thoughts on this one.
Yeah, and I think it's something I see time and time again with people starting a podcast, that they create artwork. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, but when you shrink it down to a thumbnail image, which is how it will appear on Apple or Spotify when somebody looks for it on their phone, you can't read what it says. The wording is too small or it's too fancy. The picture is too small or it's too complicated. So I would say less is more. When you're creating your artwork, shrink it down to the smallest size you can get and see, can you read what it says? And so it needs to be uncluttered. It needs to be simple. And if you're not good at design, then just use a plain colour on the background and then bold print for the title. You don't need to use photographs. You don't need to use any imagery. And a lot of very successful podcasts are just that. They are just a plain colour with the writing on it, the name of the podcast on it. Simplicity is key, and you want it bold, you want it legible, but make sure the font that you're using is as bold as possible and it's on a contrasting colour.
I've got to say, just on that, I've seen podcast thumbnails that have really it's beautiful font, but that really kind of curly font. But when you look at it on a mobile phone, and that's how most people are going to be listening to you. So when you look at it on a mobile phone, it's really hard to read. And also think about things like people with dyslexia and what colours work best for them, just making sure that it's really nice and clear when you come across it, because the scripty writing, the curly writing looks great, but then when you put it on a podcast thumbnail, you'll really struggle to read it. And basically what will happen is someone will go, I don't like the look of that, I don't like the look of that. So just really nice and clear. So number 2, original. So having that really lovely original artwork, so not something that, is copy from somebody else. It really needs to be really nice and simple. We've kind of mentioned that, and don't make it cryptic for people. Canva is a really good place to start. So have a look through templates from there, but make it your own. Really think about how it can reflect your podcast and the tone of your podcast. So if your podcast is all about being really relaxed and meditation or, coaching, what you don't want is something really in your face, really bright colours that's going to just put people off. Think about the tone of your podcast and try and reflect that in your artwork.
Yeah, just something that's original, that's reflective of you. Again, you don't need to reinvent the wheel with it. It doesn't need to be anything complicated. You don't need to be a graphic designer. Make sure that it is original. There's nothing else out there which is exactly the same. Of course, there are going to be things out there with similar colours, but try and find something which is different to those that are already in your genre. And as Susie said, we love Canva. It's got some great templates to use as a starting point. If you use one of the more common templates, you might get stuck with that because the podcast directories like Apple and Spotify won't see that as very original, but you can use it as a starting point and then modify it if you get stuck. And remember, you can always update it, so don't get too hung up on it.
Yeah, I was going to say that, for our podcast, Podcasting in 3 Easy Steps, we've changed our artwork, and it's something you can either change as you go along the artwork for individual episodes, or you can just change your podcast episodes. So don't let this be a hurdle. If it's doesn't feel quite right or quite perfect, get something out there that's easy and simple, and then think in the back of your mind, I could change it next season if I needed to. Number 3, and I'm going to hand over to Jules for this because you are very clever with the technical details. The tech, we need to get the technical details right on the artwork, otherwise it's going to drive you crazy trying to resize things. Jules, what do we need to be able to get that podcast up there with the artwork and get it all right?
This is really simple and straightforward. Your podcast artwork, that's the show artwork, the series artwork, the image has to be square. It has to be between 1,500 and 3,000 pixels square. And it has to be a JPEG or PNG file. And if it doesn't comply with those, you won't be able to get it onto your podcast hosting platform. You won't be able to get it onto Apple, and you won't be able to get it onto Spotify. But it's pretty straightforward. Apple has got some quite strict guidelines on artwork. So make sure you read through what they require. They're very easy to follow, but if you don't comply with them, and that is one of the main ones is the size, then your podcast can never be featured on Apple's homepage because it's in breach of their guidelines, and they're obviously one of the biggest directories that you want to get your podcast on. And we will link to the Apple guidelines in the show notes.
So artwork in 3 steps. Keep it bold and easy to see and nice and legible. Number 2 is original. It can be simple, but just keep it original. Try not copy anyone's. And number 3 is your technical details. Make sure you get them right.
Great. And yeah, as I said, links to the Apple guidelines in the show notes. So thanks very much for listening, and join us again in January, and have a very lovely Christmas.
Have a good Christmas. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Podcasting in 3 Easy Steps. We hope it's helped you get started with creating your podcast.
Please share this episode with someone you think would love it. Follow so you never miss an episode, and leave us a review. Oh, and also get in touch to tell us about your podcast, and we'll share it with our listeners too. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. See you next time.